So we have Jennifer Lavars joining us today. She's a marine biologist at the Institute for Marine and Antarctic Studies in Tasmania, Australia. Her research focuses on marine plastic pollution, including the chemicals that are associated with those plastics. So she uses seabirds as her sentinels, her spies, as they crisscross the ocean searching for food and accidentally ingesting plastics. So by studying what those birds eat, she can learn a lot about the health of our oceans. So Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us live today. I know you had to stay up a little bit later for us, but we're so excited to have you joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Yes, it is quite late here, but it's all in the name of science.
All right, awesome. Well, Jennifer, you have a pretty awesome job. You're like a detective yourself, going out in the field, researching, studying, learning all about the extent of the problem. So we're excited to learn a little bit about your research.
I am very lucky to travel the world doing what I do, and even more lucky to get to share it with everyone who's watching today and around the world.
All right, awesome. Well, Jennifer, when you're ready, go ahead and share your screen, and yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Okay, everyone, let's get started. I'm just going to share my screen with you. Hopefully you can start to all see me moving around here. Just give me a shout out if you can't see what's up on my screen right now. You should be able to see my name and a bit of a plan on the kind of the journey that I hope to take you all on today over the next kind of 20 minutes or so. So my plan is to show you a little bit about, first of all, who I am and why I'm up on the screen. So a little bit about me, and a little bit also about where in the world is this place called Tasmania, which is where I'm currently based. It's a place that I actually knew very little about before I moved here and started my life here. So I like to share a little bit about the beauty and the wonder that is Tasmania. And then, as Joe suggested, the feature of this month is plastic pollution, and that is the feature of my research. So it's really great for me to be able to share a little bit about what I do every day, day in and day out for my job, which is all about plastic in the ocean. And looping into that is this story of seabirds and how seabirds can actually be CIA agents, little spies in the sky, my eyes, my ears. They can tell me a bit about what's going on out there in the big blue ocean, far beyond where scientists can often get to. So how is it that seabirds do this? And what is it that I, as a scientist, can get from them that's useful for us back home in our cities? So let's start out with this. Let's figure out what's going on. So who am I? So my name is Jennifer, and I'm a marine biologist, and it's one of these exciting, cool jobs. Everyone assumes that if you're a marine biologist, you must work on dolphins, but I don't actually work on dolphins ever. I work on seabirds, but I do get to go to some pretty exotic places where dolphins also live, including remote tropical islands. But I didn't start off there. I started off in Canada, where it's cold and it's snowing, and I know that some of you are actually in places where it might be cold and snowing very soon. So I feel your pain. And I now work for the University of Tasmania down here in the south, and I'm going to show you all about Tassie in a second. And I teach courses like marine conservation, and I have students who sit in front of me just like you are now, and I like to share with them a bit about the world and inspire them to become the next leaders, the next generation of scientists. So this map there's a lot going on here, but let's break it down into pieces. Like you, I spend most of my time actually sitting in front of a desk, reading, learning, teaching. But when I'm not sitting in front of a desk, I'm actually off traveling the world doing exciting things. And the little black dots that you see here on the screen and all these names and places are some of the many places I've been really lucky to travel to in my life, from the Arctic of Canada through to the tropics and kind of almost just about everywhere in between. So I'm going to focus on a couple of places, one of which is Henderson Island in red and in capital letters. That should hopefully be on kind of I'm going to turn that around, hopefully on the left of your screen, and also Lord Howe Island. Now, this is you in green. you're kind of all along the eastern shoreline of the United States and Canada. And that's me in yellow in the bottom right-hand corner. So we are currently really far apart, just about as far apart as you can get on that map. But we're going to come together on this journey of Henderson Island and Lord Howe Island. And if you're interested, that little dot in the middle of the Indian Ocean in pink called Cocos Island is actually where I'm headed next week. So maybe I can send through some updates from Cocos Island about the plastic and the birds and everything that I'm doing, because I'm actually traveling with a film crew to create a film documentary about plastic. So it's very exciting, and I'll be out in the middle of the ocean. Stay tuned for that. So let's focus on Tassie for a minute. When you think about Tasmania, if you know anything about that word Tasmania or Tassie, probably the only thing you know is maybe the Tassie Devil, which is one of the cartoons that I grew up with, certainly. But the Tassie Devil is actually based on this animal, which is actually called the Tassie Devil. So that's actually quite right. But he looks a little bit different. He actually exists here in Tasmania, and he's quite an iconic creature. Everybody loves him. But we also have some other really spectacular animals here in Tasmania that are much loved, and I wanted to share them with you. So we have something called the little blue penguin. Tiny little guy, only about this big, and he is actually blue. So he's not just a gorgeous little penguin, but he's blue. It's really amazing. We also have wombats, which are like your equivalent of a bear, except much, much smaller and far less dangerous. So just as cute, but no big teeth, which is kind of good for Tassie. We also have albatross, which are gorgeous and my favorite. And we have something that is truly remarkable. We have a lobster, but it's not a normal lobster. I think we have something interesting about the color blue in Tasmania. We have a blue penguin, and we have a blue lobster, believe it or not. And this lobster doesn't live in the ocean, it lives in the forest, just to be a little bit more unique. We also have some spectacular beaches. If you ever want to come on vacation and maybe come and say hello to me, you're more than welcome to come and see our beautiful beaches. And we have some really, really gorgeous mountains as well. So we have everything you could possibly want in this wonderful place called Tasmania. So let's begin our journey. The first stop I want to take you on is Henderson Island, which is pretty much the most remote island on Earth. It's in the South Pacific Ocean, and the nearest bit of land is either Australia or South America. Take your pick. Either is about 3,000 kilometers away. So to put that in perspective, to get to Henderson Island took me about 5 days of travel. That's the quickest you can get there. And I think really amazing is all of the contestants who have been on Survivor over many, many seasons. Everybody loves to watch Survivor on television. Those contestants survive on the TV show Survivor for about only 40 or 50 days, and they really, really struggle. It's quite hard to survive on Survivor. But I lived on Henderson Island with no power, no fresh water, no running water, and the nearest hospital was more than 2,000 kilometers away, and the nearest fresh water was more than 100 kilometers away. And I survived there for more than 100 days. So how did this all happen? How did we survive on Henderson Island? Well, allow me to show you. It's an amazing place. So this is how we arrived on Henderson Island. We had to offload everything that we needed to survive those 100 days. So you can see that we had more than 900 gallons of fresh water that we had to bring with us. Very, very exhausting work. You can see just how exhausted my colleague here is. I was too, and my muscles hurt so bad from offloading all of this water and food. You can see here the wonderful team. I'm just on the right-hand side of this frame, and we farewelled the ship for the last time before we saw it again more than 100 days later. That was our team of 7 people on this uninhabited island in the remote South Pacific. It was a very wonderful time. That's me. This was our camp. So this is the before picture. Remember that Henderson is uninhabited, so most of the island looked like this, pristine, beautiful forest. And this is after we set it up to suit our purposes. So it was actually quite comfortable, maybe a little bit more comfortable than your typical Survivor episode. But the food was maybe not that much better than Survivor. It was life in a can. Cans and cans and cans of everything you can possibly imagine, from peaches to pears to beans to corn. Imagine eating out of a can every single day for months and months on end. It was quite an adventure in itself. This is our beautiful camp as we would climb up to the top of the cliff and watch the sun rise and the sunset. You can see it just over in the distance there, where we also had to learn how to set up a system to collect our own rainwater, because of course Henderson Island doesn't have any fresh water itself. So it was incredibly important. And you can see at the base of our feet here, as we're sitting on the cliff, the coral, the island, the surface is very, very sharp. So it was a very challenging island to live on, but also very, very beautiful. So you might be wondering, why would anyone go to an island like Henderson Island when there's no food and no water, and the island is so sharp and it's so far away and so difficult to live? Well, let's talk about that. Why would I go there? So this is a picture of Henderson Island, many, many years before I ever went there, taken in 1995. It's a little bit of a grainy photo, an old photo, because it was taken so many years ago, but it shows your typical beach on a tropical island where no people live. Beautiful white sand, there's some palm trees, which you can't quite see, and some beautiful ocean. Now I'm going to show you a photo that I took when I visited Henderson Island 23 years later in 2015 from the exact same location. And this is why I went to Henderson. So you can see that there is a really significant accumulation of plastic on Henderson that is the focus of my research. So it's things like fishing nets and fishing floats that have washed up on the beach of this island where no people live, from all of the activities that are happening out there in the big blue in the ocean. So what kinds of things did I see and record on Henderson? Well, let's have a look, have a bit of a closer look. So hopefully what you can see is some of your day-to-day activities on the beach of Henderson. So in the top row, it's something pretty familiar to all of us. It's plastic toothbrushes. So here in Australia alone, we use around 30 to 35 million plastic toothbrushes every single year. And there's a really quick and easy solution to that, and it's called a bamboo toothbrush. They cost very little dollars, $1 or $2 or maybe $3, and are a much more sustainable way of brushing our teeth. And it's something that I've been using for many years. So I always encourage people to make the switch to bamboo. In the middle panel is single-use cutlery. So things when you would maybe be eating your lunch or going to a local cafe. And so certainly it's not something you expect to find on one of the most remote beaches of the island, is knives and plastic forks and plastic spoons. And on the bottom one is lots of items that you might find in a bathroom, in your bathroom, in fact, if you go home today. So it's razors that your father might use to shave his face, and all of these kinds of day-to-day items. And so I think islands like Henderson can teach us a lesson about the types of products that we use each day, whether or not we actually need them, and if we do need them, how best to dispose of them or find an alternative product. Now, all of this plastic on Henderson's beaches does unfortunately have some really significant impacts on the wildlife. And so while these photos on the left-hand side look really cute, look at these crabs that have learned to live inside of plastic containers, The one at the very bottom in the brown is actually a pot plant that he's living inside. It's initially quite cute. It's obviously not a natural way for these animals to live and can potentially be a little bit dangerous for them. So this is all the more reason for us to not use these items in the first place if we can, and certainly to prevent them from getting into the ocean by doing things like beach cleanup. So you can maybe adopt your local beach. We'll talk about that in a second. So the second stop on our journey is a little bit closer to my home. It's a place called Lord Howe Island. And I've been really lucky to be going there for more than a decade. So every year for the last 12 years, I go to Lord Howe Island, which you can see in the middle panel there. Very, very beautiful, beautiful turquoise water. And the reason is in that bottom panel there, you can see those birds flying around everywhere. The birds are like my CIA agents. They're my eyes and my ears. As they're flying around on the ocean, they're collecting samples and they're collecting data for me. So what are they doing exactly? Well, when the birds go out over the open ocean, they recognize anything floating on the surface as potential food. They don't know that plastic is not food. And so they accidentally pick it up and they bring it back. And you can see in the middle panel there, that beautiful albatross is feeding its chick via a process called regurgitation. It's a little bit yucky, but what it essentially means is I can follow these birds through time. I can monitor them and I can look at what they're eating, how much, and whether plastic is part of the problem. And in doing so, it tells me whether or not the plastic is coming from the ocean and whether or not there's more plastic now in the ocean than there was 10 years ago or not. Hopefully not. So what are we finding on Lord Howe Island? Well, this is a photo, and I apologize, it's maybe a little bit graphic, but this is essentially what we're seeing, is that the birds don't realize that plastic is not food, and their bellies are literally full of plastic. So those are my hands there next to one of the seabirds' stomachs. And sometimes these birds contain more than 100 pieces of plastic. So again, it's a really great opportunity to think about the types of plastic you use each day and whether or not there's opportunities for you, your family, maybe even your school to find alternative products. A really great one for schools is they now have highlighters for when you're doing marking in your books that are actually made of just pencils, just wood, no plastic. So that's a great one for schools to look into investing in. So we've gone on a bit of a journey to a couple of locations. We've seen plastic on beaches and plastic in birds. What can you do as students and teachers and to show your families? What can you do to help? Well, there's certainly at least 3 things you can do starting right now, today, and they're free, essentially. So if you don't already know, there's something called a plastic microbead. It's a tiny little scrubber that's found in things like face scrubs or body wash. And if the product is quite colorful, it often is containing plastic microbeads rather than natural products. And so a really quick way to make a big difference to the ocean is to avoid these products that have the colorful plastic microbeads and instead look for ones like in the top left corner that have maybe apricot shells or cocoa beans or salt scrub or anything like that that you can use in your home, in your day-to-day lives that doesn't cause any harm to the ocean. Because these teeny tiny little particles are perfectly bite-sized for things like fish and krill and other marine creatures that are very tiny. So we need to keep them from getting into the ocean. Another thing that I really commonly find in marine wildlife, either they've eaten it or like some of these photos show they become entangled. Some of these images actually came from Florida, and I know that one of the schools who's listening today is from Florida, is balloons. And so this is something that I think we can all commit to, for example, blowing bubbles, not balloons. So here's a whole range of examples of things that you can do to celebrate your next birthday, or maybe a graduation, or really just about anything. You can light a candle, you can get some chalk and write on your street. And again, you can blow some beautiful bubbles, which is just as lovely a nice way to celebrate and doesn't cause seabirds or turtles any harm. Finally, I really suggest that whether you live near a beach, or maybe it's your street corner or a river, or even the local park at your school, you can adopt that area and make it yours, and go and do a regular cleanup. And you can even, if you feel really inspired, maybe if math or science is your thing, you can actually collect that data and record it. And there's some wonderful databases that I can share with you where you can collect that data over time on the number of drink bottles or plastic bags, and you can upload that data to an international database that will help share with the world what you've collected and how that compares with other locations. They've actually had some fantastic competitions between neighboring schools where they've seen which school can clean more area of a beach or can find more rubbish on their local playground, and schools can get access to each other's data. And so if there's any teachers or students who would like information about where those databases are and how to get access to that information, I can certainly provide it. But the key here is to not be afraid to adopt your local street, your local park, your local beach, and get involved, because it's up to all of us. So I just want to thank everyone for sitting in.